Hi, I'm Mike Mathews, Operations Manager with the Janesville Innovation Center, and today we're talking with Brian Garcia from Copper Fire Tees. Brian's got an interesting story. Brian, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely.
We can't take him away from the work that's being done, so he's going to show us a little bit of what Copper Fire Tees does on a daily basis. So Brian, you started the business a few years ago. Let's take it back a few years ago. What was on your mind just before you decided to make Copper Fire Tees a business?
So we started, I do have a business partner. Our kids were going to school together here in town. He is a full-time firefighter down in northern Illinois. I was at the time a police officer for a jurisdiction just outside of Madison. And I was working second shift. We joked that firefighters never work, so we both had some free time available to us. So what happened was I was going to start with embroidery, was my idea. His parents own a few businesses that go through a lot of t-shirts, so we started pondering the idea of screen printing. Put our thoughts together, came up with a plan, nearly had it foiled when he said we should probably talk to our wives. So we did that, got together. We started with the equipment that's behind you, which is the 6-color, 4-station manual press. We ran that in my basement for about a year and a half, during which time we added a single head embroidery machine out of my basement. Quickly realized we're out of space. So we got connected with you here at the Innovation Center, moved in here February of 16. Started out in a smaller bay next door, about 1,400 square feet with an office up front. About 7 months later, we got into this automated equipment, which really elevated it to a new level. We had this installed September of 16. I gave notice to the police department I was working for about 3 weeks later. We're just over a year right now since I left the police department and have been here full time. Since that time, we've added a second single head embroidery machine. We added a 4-head embroidery machine, and we're potentially going to be adding another 6-head machine in the next 3 to 6 months, depending on volume. So
built a lot of capacity up over a pretty short period of time, really.
And that's what we're trying to do is in screen printing and embroidery, volume is everything. When you have the ability to take on those 1,000-piece, 2,000-piece orders, there's a lot of print shops out there in the country. Not a lot of them can handle that kind of volume, because anybody that's printing manually, you might get, depending on how many colors it is, I mean, every color you're dropping the screen, pushing the squeegee, lifting it up.
Pretty manual process.
Yeah, versus on this with the 7-color automatic, they're all printing in sequence, so you can print a 7-color shirt in the same time it takes to do a 1-color shirt here, versus the manual, each color in each shirt is a separate piece. So we're able to, we try not to kill ourselves. We typically, it'll run, depending on the size of the image, it's rated, it'll run 700 to 800 pieces an hour. We try to scale that back. We usually hit between 350 and 450, depending on what type of ink we're using. Industry standard is like a plastisol ink. It's basically minuscule pieces of PVC beads that when it goes through the heating elements in the oven, it melts, it fuses to the shirt, and that's what everybody's used to. If you have white t-shirts, or I should say black t-shirts with white ink, that plastisol, because there's so much pigment in it, that white is usually the first thing to crack because of that PVC. It's not meant to be there forever. We also use a lot of water-based ink, discharge ink. It's different types of ink that give you a much softer feel. Discharge ink, you're actually dyeing the fibers of the shirt, so there is nothing to crack and peel. Only works on 100% natural products, so either cotton, modal, some of those natural fibers. Polyester shirts, 50-50 shirts, it will only discharge and dye the cotton fibers, not the polyester fibers. We've had some pieces turn out really good with that because it kind of gives it that vintage washed out look that some customers are after. So we kind of view this as a craft, not a manufacturing place. We try to do the best we can to get the artwork the way the customer wanted it, as opposed to just churning out orders day after day after day after day. Quality is very important to us. If we get a 3-color job up on the press, and it just doesn't look right. I'll pull the screens off, go back to the computer, change some of the artwork, change maybe some of the borders or trapping. I'll change that stuff, burn new screens, put it up on press, because when this shirt goes out the door, my name is on it. And I want to make sure that what we put out the door is of the highest quality we can do.
Right. So of all the things you could have done, why screen printing, embroidery? How did you land on this particular business idea?
So my father out in California, where I grew up, has owned a sewing machine and vacuum store for 40 years. I was out there visiting summer of 14, and he had an old commercial embroidery machine on his floor on consignment, had no software, it didn't work. It got my wheels turning. I'm going, okay, I got a basement. I work second shift. I got all mornings free now that my kids are in school. Got connected with John Vance, my business partner, pitched the idea of me getting embroidery. He brought up screen printing, went online, found some startup kits, kind of learned the basics of it, took some measurements, figured out it'll fit in my basement, and said, okay, let's give it a shot.
So can you talk a little bit about the products? I mean, you're looking around, you've got hats, you've got sweatshirts, t-shirts.
Yep.
Do you have any limits in what you can take on for a customer?
There's some brands that we don't carry. Some of the higher brands that have a lot of, the professional athlete endorsements. I don't know if I can say certain brands on here. We don't deal with Under Armour, but we have a lot of comparable brands quality-wise at more affordable rates. Under Armour it doesn't fit our business model. Their prices are higher. They have a great product. It's not what we're after. We do a lot of t-shirts, long sleeves, hoodies, tank tops. We've screen printed on blankets, on towels. From an embroidery standpoint, I would say probably 50 to 60% of what we do is hats. We do a lot of polos. The nice thing about embroidery is there's a one-time digitizing setup fee. So once we have that image digitized, set up for embroidery, we have it. It's not like screen printing where every time you order shirts, you have to pay the setup fees to get the screen set up each and every time. With embroidery, it works well with some of our business customers. They order 35 or 40 polos with their company logo on it. A month later, they hire somebody new and they say, hey, we need 4 more polos. We can order 4 polos. We already have the image. We can sew out 4 polos, and there's no setups. So we're able to keep that price affordable for the businesses that may be ordering in small quantities more frequently. Embroidery a lot of times is the way to go with stuff like that. Because by the time you factor in screen printing setup fees, volume, it can be a lot more cost effective sometimes if you're only ordering 4 or 6 or 8 of something to get embroidered polos than it would be to get a t-shirt screen printed.
So tell us a little bit about your customers. Who are your customers? What's kind of the general group that you work with, and how do they find you, or how do you find them?
So typically, I would say most of our customers are within about a 50 or 60 mile radius of Janesville. My business partner, obviously working down in northern Illinois, he has a lot of contacts there. I used to work up in the greater Madison area. I have a lot of contacts there. We do a lot of work with churches, schools, nonprofits, businesses, bars, things like that. We also offer the full line of promotional products: fidget spinners, pencils, pens, yoga balls, flash drives, all branded stuff for your company.
Kind of promotional
All the
goods.
Promotional products,
Right.
yep, absolutely.
Right.
So, and a lot of that online is nationwide. So our website, copperfiretees.com, actually has a design studio on it, similar to some of those online designers, where there's a ton of artwork on there, a ton of fonts, that you can go on the website, design a shirt, or I should say pick a shirt, pick a color, import designs. You can also import your own logo if you have your own artwork, design the shirt, figure out how many colors it is, put in the quote process, how many of each size you want, check out, buy it. We get notification from the admin portal on the back end of the website, provides us with the print ready artwork, all the sizes. We order the shirts. We've done orders before for people out of state where they went on the website, designed it, we printed them and shipped it. We never even talked to them.
So kind of a co-creation process.
Our core business is local. I mean, we're shop local, be local, we are local. But through the internet, through our website, through the equipment that we have the capacity that if a company in New Jersey wanted 12,000 shirts, we could print and ship 12,000 shirts. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Hey, what's changed in your business since you started?
The biggest thing that changed for us is getting into the automated equipment.
Right.
When we started printing manually, I mean, you're going to get, depending on how many colors, anywhere from 40 to 80 prints an hour done. Versus with this, we can do that in 15 minutes. The setup's still the same. To set up a screen, burn a screen, print the film is the same. And it's the same whether you're printing 1 shirt or 1,000 shirts. So that's where with screen printing, you get those costs, and that's why if somebody orders 2 shirts, they're a lot more expensive than ordering 200 or 1,000 shirts, because you get those costs and the economies of scale broken down per piece.
What about personal goals, business goals? Has anything shifted on that front from when you first started to where you're at now?
Yep. I mean, when we first started, John and I kind of came into this with the idea of, let's find a way to pay for college for our kids. Do this on the side. We've done very little advertising at all. And we kind of came into it with, let's work, print 1 or 2 days a week for a few hours, orders as they come in, set money aside for college for our kids. That quickly evolved into way more work. The phone was ringing, emails were coming in, word travels. We've done very little advertising. We've done a couple things with a couple local radio stations. That's it. Word of mouth, referrals, family, friends has been predominantly where everything has come from. So it kind of shifted from the side business in my basement to there's a need for this. There's a demand and a market for it. And that was where, when we got into the automated equipment, I made the decision to be here full time. So my business partner carries the insurance for his family, which with any small business, I mean, health insurance is an important part of your decision-making process.
Absolutely.
So he carries the insurance for his family, whereas my wife works at UW Hospital, so I have access to health insurance for my family. It made more sense for me to be here full time. So that's changed a little bit, where it's shifted from Brian and John making t-shirts in the basement to Copper Fire Tees owned and operated by Brian and John, where you have to change certain ways of the way you do things, because it's not just, hey, my buddy needs 12 shirts. It's, we have overhead, we have rent, we have equipment payments. You have to definitely fine-tune your business strategy a lot more when it's no longer just a hobby in your basement.
Yeah, so as you're growing the business, what about business assistance? As you look to people for advice or guidance, what kind of advice or guidance has been most beneficial for you?
The biggest beneficial kind of stance we've taken and advice we've received is have a plan. Not necessarily being dictated what our plan would be, but have a plan. For the first year when we were out of my basement, it was pretty much, we were shooting from the hip on just about every decision we made. We'd see something that we wanted to buy, some new piece of equipment, like, ooh, that's cool, and we'd buy it. Now, as you get into more expensive equipment, you got to think things through just a little bit more. Things like, this honeycomb pallet, there's 10 of them on here. This is a lightweight honeycomb pallet. It's aluminum. So, and they come in different sizes for different size shirts, different garment applications. They're $200 something a piece. So you're talking times 10, you're talking over $2,000 to replace all 10 of those. So like we have sleeve platens and we have a partial set. So we void out what pallets are not being used, and it slows our production down significantly, but it's what we can afford to kind of grow the business as things progress.
Yeah. So you came into this with some idea of the talents and experience that you were going to bring into the business, and you probably thought that those were going to be really helpful. What were they, and have they really been as helpful as you thought they might be?
I came from a manufacturing background, I spent 4 years in the military. I was Coast Guard aviation flight crew on rescue helicopters out in Hawaii. Did that for 4 years after high school. Got out of high school, moved here. I ended up working in the auto industry here in town for about 5 years. I was at Alcoa Aluminum down in Beloit, the cast auto wheel plant. Was there, started as an hourly employee out in the foundry, finished up my bachelor's degree in business management, became a supervisor, ultimately, eventually became the paint shop manager, left there and went to Lear Corporation here in Janesville that built the seats for GM. We all know how that ended up. I was there for a little less than a year. I had twin daughters that were born 8 days after I got laid off from Lear. Used that time to finish up my MBA, put myself through the law enforcement academy up in Madison, and then May of 2010 started with the police department that I worked for. So you come into this, I had a little bit of the manufacturing background. We had used some of the lean production, the Kanban system, some of those things that, you have that base knowledge and go, how do we apply this to what we do here? It's a little bit different because we're not just churning out widgets and widgets and widgets, and we hope that people buy widgets. This is all custom stuff. So we don't really keep a lot of inventory. We have very little inventory actually, because we have 3 and 4 warehouses that we can pull product from on a 1 or 2 day ship. So we have access to their inventory on a short term. So learning the ins and outs and the nuances of how all this work has been the biggest eye-opening, because you see a t-shirt and go, oh, I'll get some t-shirts made, and you don't realize just what goes into it and how you need to do it efficiently so that it's cost effective, so that your customer gets a deal and value, but we're able to keep the doors open and the lights on.
Right. So what are the biggest challenges of being an entrepreneur from your perspective?
The biggest challenge I have, and John and I talk about this quite frequently, is how to manage getting what work needs to be done in a timely fashion. Like we talked about, I'm the only one here full-time. Now, John is certainly active as a part of the business. We both have laptops with all of our software. He does a lot of our artwork, a lot of the websites that we can build for teams, and he does come up, a few days a week to help with production. But it's all the little things that, okay, we're printing tomorrow, we have to get screens prepped and ready, so I'm in there with a pressure washer, but the phone rings or somebody comes in, and it's trying to grow responsibly. Do we have enough work here that at the time being that we could probably add a couple part-time employees? Absolutely. But I don't know what 3 months from now or 6 months from now is going to bring, and I don't want to be in a position where we hire somebody, they're doing a phenomenal job, but January rolls around, things slow down, and I say, hey, Bill, you're doing a great job, but I don't have money to pay you. So the small business kind of startup growing pains is what pulls me in many, many directions and keeps me up at night, not just because it keeps me up at night, but because I'm here often late at night.
Right. So finding that balance, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And managing your own bandwidth is part of it.
Bandwidth is everything.
So if you were starting over, are there any things that you do differently in starting or running the business?
I'm just going to get these pallets warmed up for printing here shortly. Doing things over again, I don't know. I mean, I'm not one that likes to look in the rearview mirror and dwell on what was done in the past. I think there's probably maybe some timing of, should we have waited 3 months longer or 3 months less to get equipment, and how would it have played into what business we had at the time? Timing probably of certain purchases and certain investments more than anything. We're coming up on the holiday season now, and we're starting to see an uptick in business and businesses that are getting stuff for their employees for the holidays and things like that. So having the right equipment in place at the right time of year, like it wouldn't make sense for me to buy some new equipment and have it installed in January when you're kind of in between the holiday rush and then your spring sports rush. You got to try to time when you're getting equipment, but also taking into account knowing how to use that equipment. You don't want to have new equipment show up in May right in the middle of the busy time, and now you're trying to learn how a new piece of equipment works. So timing is probably the biggest thing that I would maybe look at doing things differently, timing things.
You strike me as somebody who really enjoys being an entrepreneur. What's the best part of being an entrepreneur?
Long hours. No, I joke. So my dad has owned his own retail business for longer than I've been alive. He owns a vacuum and sewing machine store out in California. I grew up selling vacuums, so I kind of came into this with, and I've been told by many people, you can sell ice to an Eskimo if you can sell vacuums. So I have that kind of that entrepreneurial drive. I don't want to necessarily work for somebody else, because then you're working for their dream. I want to work for my dream. And by partnering with a business partner, we were able to kind of both do that together without having to stick my neck out too far just on my own. I like the daily grind. I like being able to help people, assist people, and see when they call with a vision, and then by the time we get a finished product, what goes into that, seeing what their vision turned into. I enjoy seeing that.
It's very tangible, right?
It is. So being able to do that and see how that all works, it drives me. I like having the flexibility. I'm not just punching a clock. I mean, when I was a cop, my shift was 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And you didn't know until 11 p.m. if you were getting out of there at 11 p.m. because if the big one comes in at 10:50, there was many times, even working second shift, that I would see the sunrise because you got assigned to a call or part of something. There's no flexibility. Here, I have that flexibility. I'm able to attend more of my kids' activities and sporting events, where yes, I might leave here at 3 o'clock. If you notice, at this point in time, we don't have hours of operation on our front door. We're typically here 8 to 3. We're always available by phone up until 5 or 6 o'clock. Email's the best way to reach us. But we have that flexibility that, okay, my kids have a cross-country meet in Columbus. I can go. When it's done, I might be back here at 10 o'clock at night working for 2 or 3 hours to get it done, but I have that flexibility. When you're employed elsewhere, you don't have that flexibility.
Yeah.
So
I know you've got work that you got committed for today, so we'll let you go here in a couple minutes. But before we wrap, I just want to ask for people who might be thinking about starting their own business. Based on your experience, what would you say are the most important traits or talents?
You got to have a plan in place. You got to know what you want to do, how you're going to do it, and how you're going to market it. You could have the best product in the world, but if you don't know how to market it and get it in front of customers, you're never going to get it off the ground. Mm-hmm. But the quality of the product is equally as important, because you could be the best marketer in the world, but if you're selling something that's already flooded out in the market and you're no different than anybody else, why would somebody choose you?
Right.
You know, you have to take all that into account, and you have to be willing to put in that time and effort. You know, it's not a 40-hour week. It's not 8 hours a day. It's not Monday through Friday. I'm here most every weekend. I would say John is here a good chunk of the time when he's not at the firehouse, is either doing stuff at home, taking phone calls, putting together mock-ups, doing artwork, and trying to juggle everything. You got to be willing to put in the time. If you think you can start your own business and, hey, every, Friday night at 5 is quitting time, we're done, maybe it's not for you.
So if somebody's out there and they're committed, they're already going to make this leap to start the business, what's the one piece of advice that you would say they need to be thinking about at that stage?
Know what you're doing. Know what your plan is. You don't necessarily need to know how you're going to get there to a T. There's a lot of resources out there. We've worked with mentorship groups based out of Madison. We recently joined Forward Janesville. So there's a lot of resources out there, but you got to be willing to reach out to those and meet with them and take advice they have. There's a lot of experience in Rock County and Wisconsin as a whole of people who run businesses and have built them from the ground up to a multi-billion-dollar company. Some people have done that multiple times. They're a serial entrepreneur. They start a business, they build it up, they sell it. They start a business. So there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and you have to be able to utilize it and recognize when, hey, maybe what I'm doing is not the right way to do it. We kind of joke, education and knowledge costs money. You can either pay to go to training and learn how to do it, or you can screw stuff up. Either way, that knowledge of what you're learning costs you. It has a value to it. So to say, well, I'm just going to watch a bunch of YouTube videos and figure it out on my own, we did that, and it helped with a lot of stuff. But when it comes down to the nuts and bolts and the fine tuning of stuff, you got to be able to seek out help, use that knowledge, and apply it to what you're doing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, Brian, thanks for your military service. Thank you for your service as a police officer, and thanks for being an entrepreneur making things happen here in Rock County.
Absolutely.